So chapter 9 is all about this idea of the two types of problems, the physical and the imaginary problems, kind of, right?
Um, is it?
Well, I guess I shouldn't say imaginary problems, more of the
Oh, like problems that we imagine or problems that an animal can understand?
right, the physical versus the mental.
Yeah. So, and most of our problems are imaginary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's probably a taboo word to say right now because even Martha mentions in the book, like, saying that doesn't mean your problems aren't real.
Well, I think she does that out of compassion. Because for someone that is steeped in anxiety and in complete fight or flight, it's almost like a slap in the face to say, that's not really a problem. It's all in your imagination.
Right, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think because I'm an imagination station. Like, this is my favorite part.
Mm-hmm.
I read it 3 times and underlined it. This is really getting us, for me, into sort of training us in how to do imaginative play. Like really getting into the spirit and the flow of puzzle cracking. Like taking us through what all humans like. It's a 4-step process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that because I'm such a how-to. Like, tell me what I need to do and I'll follow along.
Number 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right. Right. It's kind of starting to pump those muscles or pump those weights to grow those muscles.
The imagination muscles, though, because they're soft, fluffy cloud muscles. They're not the, One of the things that I like is that she talks about how everyone has their own path. And one of the examples that she uses, all names have been changed, is so-and-so who uses the path of play. We have a choice in how we learn. And I love that she gives an example of each one.
The different individuals and their
different
process.
individuals, yeah, and how they go through things. Well, do you want to go into the 4 steps for our amazing listeners?
Sure.
They're on page 156.
Let me make sure there's... I guess this is kind of just like an intro bit, but on page 155 I had a little star next to the second paragraph in solving problems with your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that idea of the logical brain and what we're so used to, the process. But I liked when she said, when menders use mind and body to help create things, let's see, let me start over. I'm trying to paraphrase like I always do. So here it says, when menders use mind and body to help create the things we've imagined, our technologies of magic intersect with our rationalist approach to life. We call this problem solving. So yeah, I liked that kind of mesh of just the mind and body process.
I underlined that too. Well, and I actually jumped down to the next paragraph where she says, as well as okay, so I kind of did the same thing. We use imagination to problem solve in specific ways that are unusual for other people, but very similar from wayfinder to wayfinder. So she talks about the gifts of problem solving in all cultures. And what that brought to mind for me was the way that Albert Einstein conducted his experiments. They were thought experiments. They were imagination station puzzle cracking.
And as if we need it, but isn't that all the credibility in the world?
Yes, and do you know what my favorite Albert Einstein quote is? And I hope I haven't said it already 3 times. Play is serious learning.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite Albert Einstein quote. But what's interesting is what you just said, as if we didn't need anything. What did you say?
The credibility behind it, kind of that proof.
That really made my mama say go, huh? Because I think that some folks, what that brings to mind for me is that some folks might be reading this and going, this is a little way off for me. You know what I mean? I'm not quite there yet, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the part of it having credibility in science with known, you know, sort of intellects like Albert Einstein, but for me, it has credibility in you know, through thousands of years, through, you know, cultures around the world. It's the way that we come to problem solve. And my grandmother, she had a conversation with me once and I outlined it. I told you a little bit about it. And she was able to sort of cite 4 different disciplines. And she doesn't know how to read, write, or speak English. And she's never been to school. But it was the way that she framed her thoughts and her perspective on the world. And I thought to myself, we have what we need to know.
Mm-hmm.
There's no sort of outside in. It's an inside out kind of work.
Well, and I think this concept of like a perspective change has been so overused that it's almost bland. But if we really think about this whole process, this is just some heavy duty, you know, perspective shifting, kind of refocusing. And, you know, she talks about this opportunity to imagine. That's what the problems bring about. You know, and if you're able to see things in a different way and look at them like that opportunity for play and for learning rather than just, another bump in the road, you know, that's where the magic is.
Well, and one thing that I think is important to know is that it's a choice. Like if we are very happy in our suffering, I don't know how we could be. But if our suffering comforts us, then this is not going to appeal to us. You know, we're not going to want to play and problem solve to get away from the pain. We're going to want to wrap a blanket, get a pint of ice cream, and use, you know, a Hershey bar as a spoon.
Yeah. I think mine would be an Oreo, but...
Oreos. Oh my goodness. You have just like sparked a craving in me.
Oh no.
Oreos.
A good one though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes, sorry to take a little detour. So we're going
it's a perfect detour.
The specific steps.
Just as a framework.
So this is always the precursor. She always talks about, you know, dropping into wordlessness and oneness. But let's see, is that...
That's step 1. Yeah, grounding yourself deeply. You know, I heard Oprah call it the power station. She actually cited a biblical verse from Acts, I believe, that says, "In God I move and breathe and have my being." And she attributes her success and her, you know, sort of what did she call it? The trajectory of her life as moving from the inside out, you know, always being grounded and coming from that power station. So for some, it's a stillness practice, a mindfulness practice, a moving practice. Could be a shower. You know, I think the beauty of the first step is that it's specific to each individual and where they find their space.
Right, and you know, it's fairly simple. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's too easy. But it's, you know, if you make that kind of adjustment to dedicating a certain amount of time, if that's what you need or whatever, the practice is simple. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah, it is simple. And I think people will find it when they touch their joy. You know, it might even at first just be like a blink of an eye, just a second where they relax. Or it might be just before sleep. It does take awareness and practice, but it's not hard at all. So step 2. This is what we talked about before.
On determining imaginary.
Yeah, is it imaginary or is it physical? I think anyone that's listening to us right now has a purely imaginary problem. Because in this very moment, they're tapped into technology and in conversation with us. And so all the problems are really outside of this space.
Mm-hmm. And I love how she kind of tests you on this later on.
Ooh, why does she do that?
Well, this is the tricky part, She has you walk through that process of the situation versus the problem. Mm-hmm. And then she's like, she's like, technically, if you were in wordlessness, you wouldn't have come up with any problems.
Yeah.
And she says, in wordlessness, that space can't sustain painful stories.
Mm-hmm. That's why I called it a blink, because they come back. They come back sort of like, have you ever stood on a beach and you step into the sand and the water goes away, but then it immediately comes right back? Mm-hmm. Kind of like that, like the story seeps back in. So step 3 is to solve imaginary problems with imagination. Ignore the physical solutions that don't address the issues in its real sphere of existence, the imaginary realm, and so cannot be effective. I'm going to skip over to that part because that just confused me reading it.
I was kind of went blank for a moment when you were saying that.
You're like, what? So,
I was focusing more at the bottom of this idea of the misprints.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I think was a core principle of this.
That it keeps repeating itself until we fix the operating system.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
I think that's where some people find that they're in the same situation with a different person.
Right.
Or they're in the same job but with a different organization. Mm-hmm. And that's because we bring our problems with us.
Right.
Until we solve them.
And until you get used to the process, fixing the misprint obviously seems, well, maybe not obviously, but seems like the bigger task at hand. Like, oh God, how am I going to be able to tackle that one? But in theory, focusing on the origin rather than kind of trying to keep the ball in the air by, putting out fires every situation and every scenario. If you look at it that way, fixing the original problem is less work and more rewarding.
It's sustainable. Mm-hmm. Because you said keeping the balls in the air, and for me, it's pushing things down.
Yeah. And
as soon as you sort of lose your attention on, holding that beach ball underwater, it pops up like a volcano.
I like that visual. Yeah.
That's been my practice, is let's just push things away. Let's just hold them down, make them invisible, and they won't be there. So how do you spot our problems? We spot them because, we're Martha Beck coaches. And what's our favorite way to start a session?
The infamous question. Right. So, obviously she talks about rephrasing it, but the idea is focusing on your area of least satisfaction.
Yeah, what's sucking in your life right now?
Yeah.
Before we started recording, I actually, well, not immediately before because I was having dinner, but before I was alone and sort of in a space where I was like, if Sarah asked me for a problem and we go through like a real life example of this, what would I come up with? And I think because I was in such a calm and sort of steady state, I couldn't come up with one.
Isn't that a problem to have?
It's a cool problem. And then, so my mind immediately says, well, you're being this, and, you know, you're intellectualizing, or you're disassociating. All these words came up, right? But then I found this phrase that she wrote in page 166, where she says, the spiritual teacher Byron Katie likes to say, when I walk into a group of people, I know they all love me. I just don't expect them to realize it yet.
Mm-hmm.
This,
sassy?
love it. This joyful grounding in oneness means there's literally no way to hurt her feelings. Is she imagining things? Well, of course she is. Things that heal. And it's working for her. As I have or am in recovery from the disease to please, you know. So that was just so comforting for me. Let me be crazy. Let me be crazy and so freaking happy.
Right. I mean,
call me what you want.
Like, why not?
Call me
Let's
what you
be
want.
Alternative. Exactly.
Yeah, pain, suffering, stories, like dragging things across the bottom of the ocean. There's one part where she talks about her stories and how they changed once she reimagined them. And the one that I love most is many people I dearly love no longer have active relationships with me. And her physical change when she reimagined it is, I feel love and joy when I think about these people and my relationships with them. That felt so healing. It felt so...
That's where the sweetness is.
The sweetness. Oh, I love that, the sweetness. You know what else it made me do, Sara?
Yes.
It made me sort of cradle these terms that she gives us. You know, creative artists, mystics, wayfinders, healers, visionaries. I think I recognize that I say the words I think a lot, so I'm trying not to, which will make me say them more. But those are becoming more and more terms of endearment to me than they were before. Do you relate easily to those identifiers?
I think that's kind of the flow or the process of that idea of acceptance and just opening up to it. There are certain words that resonate more than others. But right, when even when these concepts come up, you know, the other day I mentioned that idea of what a shaman is and who the real healer is. You know, I think it's it's not demystifying them because I still think they're so beautiful, but it does seem closer, or they do seem closer to home.
I like the way that you said that. And what is home?
Yeah, essentially it's your true nature. Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. You're such a mystic.
Oh, dear God. We don't need to go that far.
You know, but by nature, you're there. And what happens, I think, is what happens to all of us, is that as soon as we bring thought into it, we push it away. Mm-hmm. But it's so close to us. It's closer. It's there's no division between us and our natural healing wayfinder tendencies.
Mm-hmm. And I think that brings us to the point, when she's talking on page 168, kind of about the power behind it all. You know, when you're in this space and when you're connected, you know, these problems are just, I don't know, so minute compared to what you're able to take on also. I think in the middle of the page she says, once all you've done, here I go paraphrasing again. Let me start over. Once you've done all you can to make yourself physically comfortable in the present moment, and you're so grounded in oneness and wordlessness that you have no emotional discontent, You may turn your imagination to do things like building a fortune, eradicating social justice, or even saving the world. In fact, that's what you will do as you express your true nature. The wayfinding imagination will go much further than your comparatively tiny mind could dream.
That is an encyclopedia of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
In how many sentences? 2?
Well, let's see here.
It's 2 sentences, Sarah.
I'm only seeing one. Oh yeah, it is
There's
2.
that 1 period.
It's 2. Yeah.
An encyclopedia of wisdom.
And it answers the big why. Why even do it? Why? Well, that's why.
That's why. Because then you can get there. So right before that, she tells the story of is it Melissa Gilbert? Did I say her name right?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth. And I adore her, you know. So I'm sorry I didn't say her name.
It's your imaginary friend
popping
out here and there.
She is my imaginary friend. She talks to me in her books. So when Elizabeth Gilbert's describing her existential experience, you know, on the bottom of the bathroom floor, and we all have at least one, you know, the voice says, go back to bed. Because it's exactly that. We can only do, and in the page before she says, true wisdom gives the only possible answer at any given moment. At any given moment, the only possible answer. And the first answer, and this I love so dearly because it goes back to my sort of signature process, love being human. It's this compassion for humanity. Are we tired? Do we need rest? You know, are we thirsty? Do we just need a hug? You know, what is it that we can give ourselves to physically be comfortable? Because without that, we will never go into rest and relax. We will continue to be in fight or flight. We have to sort of cradle this human body and be compassionate towards its weakness. Should I keep talking?
No, I'm just contemplating that idea of weakness.
The body is so weak. Look at how we come into the world as babies.
You know, maybe fragile or vulnerable.
But not weak?
I don't know. I'm not feeling the weakness right now because I think that's somewhat against our true nature, you know, and our body is an extension of that.
Well, and I don't know where I'm getting it from, but in our weakness is our power.
There you go. Yeah.
Are you feeling that a little bit more?
That's the home run. Yeah. There we go.
Okay, you conjured it out of me. Thank you.
That was awesome.
That is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So once we have that groundedness, our emotional discontent, and even those 2 words, they're just like a symphony. Emotional discontent dissolves. So that's step 3. And then step 4, the magical 4th step, is, and I'm looking at it on a different page, clean up the physical aspects of the problem if there are any. So in the book, that starts on page 169.
Okay, I'm getting there.
And what's magical about that, this physical, clean up the physical aspects, she starts to talk about the recent research. And even the Dalai Lama, he just celebrated his 80th birthday. And he talks about bringing an intention to our inner value, not just because of peace of mind, but because of physical health.
Mm-hmm.
And in the research that Martha cites, she talks about literally aging in reverse.
Oh gosh, I know. When the fingers lengthening.
Wasn't that creepy?
Yes.
And for those of you that are new to Sarah and I, creepy is an internal term we use for Weirdly amazing.
It's a positive.
It's
creepy cool.
Creepy cool. It's so creepy cool. So
that concept is so amazing.
That we fix ourselves?
Yes.
That we heal ourselves?
Fix ourselves, but that we improve. I almost don't want to say improve, but in a sense we do.
We do. We get better. She says on page 171, I suspect that as you use the third technology of magic, every quote unquote or air quotes problem from your chronic heartburn to your epic heartbreak will begin to shift, soften, and change in the direction that makes you happier. Can I give you a real life example of this?
Please do.
It's going to seem silly, but it is the honest to God truth across my heart. So, I am Mexican Catholic, come from a large family, and I have this aversion to the kitchen, which brings...
That's giggle worthy.
So, it brings on these intense feelings of shame and guilt. Because I don't like to cook. I mean, I will cook for people and I enjoy serving them. Mm-hmm. But the idea, I mean, it's like shackles on. And for so many years, it was just this effort that I did, that I tried to make dinner, or I did everything. I had menus. I would, prep ahead of time. You name it. It's sort of like those 10,000 things you do to diet. 10,000 things I did to try to make making dinner easier or funner. And finally, in my wise old age, February of this year to be exact, because I wrote a blog post about it, I finally said to David, I don't enjoy this, and I don't think I ever will. And so I just was honest with him about it. And so instead of him coming home and saying, what are we having for dinner? Which was, sort of the standard pattern. He started to say, where are we having dinner? Yeah. And it just freed me. And most days actually, I would, whether it was burnt kale or, a pot of spaghetti, I would just say what it was. And it gave me so much freedom. But I think that slowly, almost magically, our lives began to fix themselves, and we began to eat organically and just healthier. This angers me a little bit, but he lost 65 pounds.
Wow.
I lost 3. And not in my thighs. So,
oh gosh.
It's sort of like this mean joke, right? But we're just so much happier now. And I think it was because I stopped trying to fix that in the worldly sense. I stopped trying to be what I thought I was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And just accepted who I was. I don't enjoy choppa in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I ever will. So then my life magically fixed itself. Slowly. Like I didn't even know it was happening until we looked back on it and go, our lives have completely changed. February, March, April, May, June, July. It's been 7 months. That's weird. And that's the paragraph on page 171. When things get weird. Because only love does real magic. And in that moment, I was finally being compassionate and loving towards myself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it began with that acceptance of the fact.
The surrender to never being Martha Stewart. The Mexican version of Martha Stewart.
Yeah.
Maria, I'm sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Maria Sanchez. And just being me. It comes back though. Do you know that?
Well, And it's funny, you know how you say you get angry when you think about your husband losing all that weight, but look at what it projected to outside of yourself also. Look at the good that it did.
Yeah. Oh, so that goes back to the paragraph we read earlier, and I'm sure that there's going to be a ruffling of pages in the audio, so forgive me, folks who have headphones on and they're turned up loud. Where is it that you read that, Sada? Because it's worth reading again.
Which are you referring to? I feel like I've read a bit.
Where we'll change the world.
Oh, that was on page 168.
Thank you. Because I want to read it again. Can I read it again?
Yeah, do it up.
Do it up. Once you've done all you can to make yourself physically comfortable in the present moment and you're grounded in oneness and worldlessness, that you have no emotional discontent, you can turn your imagination to things like building a fortune, eradicating social injustice, or saving the world. Because in fact, that's what you will do as you express your true nature. The wayfinding imagination will go much further than your comparatively tiny mind could dream. I never dreamt that just following my true nature in that very simple instance could change our lives so drastically, so beautifully. And the ripples of that are amazing. I won't talk about my new stand-up paddleboard at this moment.
That just is really inspiring. I'm glad that you shared that.
Thank you. Do you have an example of solving a problem in the imaginary realm and it manifesting itself in the real world? Or what we could do is we could do real life coaching and think of a problem and go through the steps.
Let's do that because I think I didn't reflect on it to the extent that I came up with an example.
Would you like for me to coach you?
Sure, let's try it.
So think of a problem.
Let's see.
Do you have something?
No, I feel like I'm flipping through stuff.
We might be too grounded.
Give me a minute. This is silly, but this is the only thing I'm coming up with right now. Just the concept of time and fitting things in.
So,
earlier before we were going to jump on this call, I decided to go for a walk, but I didn't have a clock with me or a watch with me. And so I started out on the walk, and then I realized it was maybe going to take a little bit longer than what I had anticipated. So yeah, it was kind of that pressure that I was putting on myself.
Where did you feel that pressure physically?
I felt it in my chest.
How would you describe the pressure?
Just kind of like an intense kind of like swirling feeling, it just kind of like a motor, kind of like motivating me to go faster.
So you had this motor pressure in your chest.
Mm-hmm.
So describe it for me, what color is it? How big is it? You said it was a motor, so what noise did it make?
Yeah, it was just this kind of like constant humming that didn't quit, and it's probably a darker color.
It was dark?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you had to relate an emotion to it, what emotion would you give it?
Anxiety.
Anxiety?
Yeah, anxiety.
So scared?
Yeah, scared, oh no, I'm going to be late, and it goes into that sequence of things.
the imagery of the Alice in Wonderland rabbit came to mind.
Oh, the little bunny.
Mm-hmm. I made him soft already. Sorry. Let me focus. So your emotion is dark. It's a humming that you're feeling pressure in your chest.
Yes.
So are you in a position where you feel comfortable?
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So allow that sensation to fill your entire awareness without resisting it. And then bring to mind the thought that you had when that sensation came up. You know, this idea of time and of feeling pressure.
Instructions. What do you want me doing? I'm sorry.
You're filling your awareness without resistance of this sensation.
And do you want me reflecting something back?
Yeah, what do you hear the thought saying internally?
I'm always focusing on the next thing. Like, you have to do this so, you know, the next thing goes smoothly.
So you're focusing on the next thing.
Yeah.
And if you were to come back to this thing, and the thing that you're doing right this second, would you have that thought?
No. It'd kind of all be a blur, I guess.
Because you would be, and I used this word earlier when I was talking to someone, you would sink yourself into the being in your doing. So if you were able to release that sense of pressure, you could have enjoyed your walk even more than you did.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I'm going to be totally transparent right now. I feel like I did that wrong. I feel like I went through the steps incorrectly.
Well, I don't think, I think it's good to note that there isn't necessarily, yes, there's this 4-step framework, but it's not necessarily going to get you to the wrong place if you do something quote unquote incorrectly.
Oh, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Because the important thing is to just isolate where that misprint is. Mm-hmm. And so if we've isolated that it's blurry because we're not sunk into what we're doing in that moment, that's why we can have that pressure of time.
Right. Essentially, you brought me through steps 1 through 3 very quickly. And then, step 4 would just be
releasing the resistance. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult. Because if it's a code, if it's a part of the imprint, then it's a much deeper sort of...
Right. It depends on how embedded the code is. Yeah. I think that one, this concept of time and whatnot is a big one.
Well, and that's another important thing to note for people who are new to coaching or find is that we think that they're superficial things that are just showing up, mm-hmm. and they usually have a really deep root.
And they're constant.
And they're constant. Yes. There's a common denominator. Every single time I fall on my butt, there's a common denominator on how I got there. Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Sarita.
Well, thank you, Vivian.
You're welcome. I hope I helped.
No, honestly, it's just those little reminders to keep your focus on those things.
And that's part of clearing up the physical problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So do we have any final insights, any things that we want to share with our listeners? It's going to get weird, is one thing.
Yeah, and my thing, my little mantra I do really strongly believe in is there is no such thing as a coincidence.
Coinciding events, I've heard it said.
Right.
Well, and the other idea that as you ask, as you sort of go into imagination and you begin to sort of envision this new beautiful reality, it's drawn towards you in ways you don't even realize. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be very, in my opinion, very transparent here. I feel like I was drawn towards you. I can imagine then of the 10,800 million, there's not that many.
Like, but what are the numbers representing?
All the cadets in all the sections. You came into my life, Sarah, and we're creating this beautiful thing for people to explore with. Mm-hmm. For people to start to begin their imagination, their journey through the 4 technologies of magic with us as we're learning it. Mm-hmm. Because we're doing exactly that. We're playing. So I guess I say that to say thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I do honestly think that as well.
Thank you. It's not a coincidence.
Right.
So imagine that.
Imagine that.